Over the weekend, we heard from some prominent Mets on the MLB lockout as Max Scherzer took to Twitter and Trevor May took to Twitch to voice their displeasure about how things are going right now between the MLBPA and the MLB and how Rob Manfred is to blame. I'll go through all of that on today's show as I give you the latest update on where things stand right now in this lockout.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans who are watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com. So let's start off talking about Max Scherzer and what he said in regards to the MLB lockup, because Max Scherzer is one of, if not the most prominent player that is involved in these talks. He is one of Scott Boras's prized clients. Scott Boras is a huge part of this committee that is guiding the players through this process. And Scherzer is, the guy. He's the superstar player. He is the veteran in the room. He is the one that is trying to get the best deal possible for his fellow players. And he does not tweet often. So when he does send something out, you should take notice. And Scherzer did take to Twitter on Friday after this really fascinating situation where the MLB tried to involve federal mediation. So let's start there before we get into Max Scherzer's tweets. Now, on Tuesday, the MLBPA submitted their latest proposal to the owners. The owners were supposed to come back with a counteroffer on Thursday. Well, that counteroffer did not come, and instead, they pushed for federal mediation. Now, federal mediation was something that took place back in the 94-95 strike that players want no part of, because back then, everyone who was involved on the player side said it was a waste of time and it didn't really get them anywhere. This is a PR move for Major League Baseball. Evan Drellick of The Athletic had a story about this on Thursday when this report came out, where a player agent surmised that this was a win-win for the commissioner's office, because if the union says no, which they did, it would be considered a PR victory. We're trying. We got the federal court involved. We wanted a third party. This is how deals come together. We were just doing everything possible to appease the players and get a deal done. And look at these big bad players that don't want to move, don't want to do anything to come closer to our side here. And they don't even want a mediator. It's all the players' fault. Well, I'm not buying it. Scherzer's not buying it. And I think, hopefully the fans aren't buying it, but that is how this is a win-win situation, because either that was going to happen, which it did, or if the players accepted this mediation, that would drag this process out, that would add more red tape. This would push this thing along a little bit further, and you would get to the situation where a couple weeks would get burned. The players would be even more desperate to get a deal done. And, you'd have this mediation process that would maybe help. But overall, it set up, again, a win-win. Either you get the mediation you desire, or the players say no, which they did, and it's supposed to look bad on the players. Well, Max Scherzer on Friday took to Twitter to defend his union. And what he basically says is, he said, this was at 3:20 on Friday, he said, "We do not need mediation because what we are offering to MLB is fair for both sides. We want a system where threshold and penalties don't function as caps, allows younger players to realize more of their market value, makes service time manipulation a thing of the past, and eliminates taking as a winning strategy." Now, all of that is phrased beautifully. And anyone who is siding with the players in this, which I consider myself someone that does side with the players, I don't think that it's ever, I don't think it ever makes sense to be on the side of billionaires as opposed to millionaires, especially when you're talking about a player like Matt Harvey, for example, right? A former Scott Boras client, or he probably is still represented by Boras, but you talk about his career, right? He's the type of player that the union right now is fighting for, because he had those years with the Mets where he was one of the most marketable stars in the game, where he was the superstar ace getting paid nothing, making a ton of money for the Wilpons and for Major League Baseball. And by the time he got to free agency, his career was on the downturn, and he's never been able to really cash in. You look at the service time manipulation that factored into a player like Harvey. You look into which with Harvey he got promoted midseason, so that doesn't really factor. But you look at manipulation for Chris Bryant, for example. You look at all of the things that they're trying to put in place here. It is about getting the players paid, but it's also about getting these safeguards out that owners have in place that allow them to operate a team and basically slash payroll when you're trying to lose, so that you can get the draft picks, get the prospects into your system, and then when you have a window to contend, that is when they invest. That does not bode well for the players who want all 30 teams competing every single year, paying to compete every single year, or at least getting closer to that. So, all of this is to say that there is just a complete, different philosophy here in what the players are pushing for and what the owners are pushing for. And that's why you're in a lockout, because the owners want to keep everything status quo. The players want the game to evolve because more money is coming into the game and they want to share in that. But the owners have the league. That there's something even in that. The fact that they are the owners that sets the hierarchy, that puts them in that position of power. And they are going to drag this thing out through mediation, through whatever they can to get the best deal possible. That's what all this is about. And look, I'm stumbling through this. This is not my forte. I'm not a lawyer. Okay. I don't know all of the things going on in the background. But what I do know is you can follow tea leaves. And when you have the players who are continuing to submit different proposals, who want to be at this bargaining table, and then you have the owners or the commissioner's office that is dragging their feet, that is being very shitty, that's not being very open with what they want. They're not outlining what they want the same way that Scherzer just outlined it on Twitter, right? But then again, that would look pretty bad to outline what we want. If this is Manfred, it would actually be hilarious if he did this. We want a system where our owners can have a $15 million payroll if possible, can tank to get draft picks, can manipulate service time to hold on to their star players longer, can pay their star players next to nothing at the early stages of their career. And then when veterans get to a point in free agency where they have accrued their service time, they've accrued their value, like a Kevin Pillar that's out there, we want to make sure our system's in place so that we can have these cheap players come through our system and not have to pay the veterans at that stage either. That is what we want in this next deal, to continue to pay the players as little as possible and to take on the biggest cut. They obviously can't say that, but their motives are just naturally shadier based on what they're pushing for, what the players, and both sides are pushing for money. It's always about money. But I just I see Rob Manfred and Scott Boras in this situation where it seems like those are the two heads of each snake. And you actually have me getting sympathetic and appreciating Boris and what he's fighting for when he's been the biggest snake in sports for a long time. Again, this isn't my number one forte. That's why we haven't been talking about lockout on this show a lot. But when you have players like Max Scherzer and Trevor May, who I'll talk about in a minute here, being as vocal as they are about this situation, we have a Mets podcast here. We got to discuss it. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to move over to Trevor May, who was very vocal on his own platform on Twitch, talking about how Rob Manfred is not negotiating in good faith. We'll get to all of that in just a minute. This is the time of year where people begin to give up on their New Year's resolutions. But I'll tell you what's helping me stick to mine, and that is Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. And if you haven't tried their Puffs yet, you are missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. They're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors like their cinnamony churro, the coconut marshmallow, the banana cream pie. They're all so good, and these are sure to become your new favorite. All Built Bars, the Puffs included, are covered in 100% real chocolate. That is real chocolate. So you got a low calorie, high protein snack that is delicious. You can replace those candy bars with protein bars that are so much better for you. They have so many great flavors to choose from, whether it's the mint brownie, coconut almond, and new this month, the white chocolate cookies and cream. Cookies and cream is my favorite. I cannot wait to try the white chocolate version. I just bought a box today when I saw this new flavor is out there. All delicious. New flavors come out all the time. If you think there's a flavor that might be good, they're going to make it for you. It'll be delicious. It'll be good for you. So make sure you go to built.com. Use that promo code LOCK15. You're going to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto store to stock all the parts you need. So why endure the often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait for that person behind the counter to order parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry, when you can have a computer at home and look for yourself at rockauto.com, or even in your pocket on your phone, and save 30%, 50%, maybe even 100% more for the exact same amount of parts at the chain store or a new car dealership. RockAuto.com is a family business that has been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer, so go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts available for your car or truck. Make sure you write Locked On in there. How'd you hear about us box? So they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliable low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, so Trevor May was on Twitch over the weekend, and he did not have the kindest words to say about Rob Manfred and how this entire process is not being negotiated in good faith. That was the overall sentiment that he was trying to articulate. And he talked about how spring training isn't going to happen in his opinion, or is going to be pushed back because the players don't get paid during spring training. So MLB does not have leverage during that time. But once you get into the season, that's where the leverage really starts. And that's a really interesting point to dive in on, because if you remember the 60 game season we just went through during the COVID year in 2020, the players got prorated salaries. Now, from the owner's perspective, that season, that was more instructive on how they could operate in one of these years where they lost games and still make a profit. I think that gave them, or that emboldened them to drag this process out this time around, because they know that as long as they get through their season and they get to the playoffs and those massive TV dollars, they will be fine. They will be able to get by. And you're talking about a collective bargaining agreement that's going to be 5 years. That's a lot of money to leave on the table if they sign a deal now just to get some extra gate on, let's just say, 20 additional games for every owner. That is minuscule compared to the money that they're going to save getting a favorable deal in the collective bargaining agreement. So that's where all of this ends up, coming into play. And the thing that's frustrating is this idea that they're trying to manipulate the fans through the media, each side, and they're trying to generate leverage however they can. And they're not just getting to the table and working through these issues. The only thing that's going to happen that's going to get a deal done is both sides fighting it out together and coming to some sort of a resolution. But as Trevor May points out, there's no good faith. As he said it isn't a mutually beneficial situation. They want to win. One of the things that he said that really got a lot of attention, this quote was, he said, MLB is not even attempting to make real offers. If you think there is good faith negotiation happening right now, there isn't. Not a single negotiation with the guy has been good faith, and that is in regards to Rob Manfred. That's the fact here. The owners are not going to accept anything but the deal that they want. And they're going to try to push the players because the natural reality about this is, as Steve Cohen is going to own the Mets a lot longer than even Francisco Lindor is going to play on the Mets. And he has the longest contract on the team, if not the largest in the sport. I had to think about it. I guess Seager just signed a new 10-year deal. But regardless, that's the situation that they're in. The players have a shortened timeline. They can enjoy their careers and make the most money throughout their careers. And right now, they're in risk of losing games. And if they lose games, they will start to lose thousands into millions of dollars, depending on the player. That is the problem here. And again, because the owners know that as long as they eventually get a season going, they will start to collect on their TV revenue. And then as long as they have their normal playoffs, that is going to give them so much money that, you know what, if you lose some on the front end, what you're going to make up on the back end, not only this year, but for the next 4 or 5 years, it's worth it to them to make this as ugly as possible, to drag this thing out. And it's frustrating because fans just want to see baseball. They don't, fans, regardless of what side you take, no one wants this process to drag out. That's the bottom line. And it seems like the players certainly are pushing for a deal sooner rather than later, whereas the owners are trying to bring in mediators. They're dragging this thing out. And again, it's just extremely frustrating. I'm sitting here today talking about lockout when we should be 2 weeks away or less than 2 weeks away from spring training, talking about positional battles, talking about, oh, look at this other signing the Mets just made ahead of camp. They just got player X in here. I've gone through, this is my, what's it, third off season now doing this show. And it'd be a lot easier to do this show in a normal off season where you would have news sprinkled throughout where, oh, the Mets just signed Jonathan VR and Kevin Pillar. Let's talk about it. Oh, look, they just added Jared Eichhoff on a minor league deal for depth. Could he be good for the Mets next year? Not knowing how bad he would become. I'm sorry, Jared. You don't deserve that today. You really don't. Boy, were you bad last year. But yeah, you go through all of this, and we are in this situation. We're all sitting on our hands, trying to figure out what to talk about, what to care about, while the owners just make a big show of all of this. And yeah, again, it's just frustrating. It's frustrating. That's all we can say about it. But the question is, when will we see a resolution? I have an idea about that. I'll talk about that more in just a minute. We'll go through what is next in this process. When could we start to see some momentum move in a positive direction? There might be less football being played, but betonline.net has way more stuff to bet on this playoff season. From scores, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline is the number one spot for all things NFL betting in 2022. And it's not just football. BetOnline.net's basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC odds coverage is the best in the business. From sports right down to your favorite Vegas casino games, BetOnline is your number one online wagering destination. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, so when will the season start? I would be lying if I told you I had a real inclination of, a start date on April 1st or, May 1st or June 1st or July 1st. Here's what I will say. I'd imagine that Major League Baseball wants the All-Star break. They want that type of a normal season. So I'd imagine that, some point they'll get a little bit more serious, but they want to really put the pressure on the players, which means the normal spring training time. I don't imagine that we get some serious negotiating from the MLB side until pitchers and catchers were supposed to report. And hopefully then we'll see these two sides, start to make some progress. But until we get to that date, the next 2 weeks, I just feel like we're going to see a lot of random stories that go into the media where the players are going to try to paint the owners and Commissioner Manfred in a bad light. And Commissioner Manfred's going to do the exact same thing about the players. And we're just going to have this process where Mommy and daddy are fighting, and the kids, the fans, are the ones hurt by all of it. So, look, the idea of what exactly the timeline's going to look like, it's so murky at this point that I can't give you a clear indication. But what I will say is, I, personally, I don't expect to see any progress made the next 2 weeks. I just don't see it happening. Especially with the latest news with the mediation, the players denying that. Is this the next week just going to be the two sides staring at each other? There's supposed to be a quarterly owners meeting coming up in Florida where the players are hopefully going to head down there and maybe get some more face to face time. And that could push things into a better direction. But again, you're at a point right now where the owners are going to try to manufacture as much leverage as possible. And the way to do that is to cut into the calendar. And you can do that by cutting into spring training. And we saw when they got the other season up and running, if I remember correctly, it was like a 2 week span that they got the players ready for that shortened season. It was like, a week of workouts and a couple exhibition games, and then went right into it. Might not even been 2 weeks. It might have been like 10 days. So I could see something similar. I mean, you see pitchers posting on social media right now. They're starting to throw. Carlos Carrasco posted something where he's starting to throw. So I'd imagine that the players are going to try to get themselves ready. And I don't think we're going to see a normal spring training. That's for sure. Maybe 2 weeks of spring training and then you jump into a season. And the crazy thing about that is you still have free agency and you still have trades that teams probably want to make. You still have rosters that have to be finalized. So it's a crazy time. You got minor league baseball where minor league baseball might start before major league baseball just based on how everything is working, where only the players on 40-man rosters can't play, so prospects can. I guess that's good in the sense that the development of some of your prospects is not going to be affected as much as just your regular roster is going to be affected. But yeah, this is bad. There's a reason why I don't talk about this on the show much, because there's not much value I can add to this discussion, because the information that I have and all of us have is just really limited. But the bottom line is, I don't expect much to change over the next 2 weeks. I do expect the season to get pushed back. And I would say that I just hope that this doesn't get ugly to the point that it's June and we don't see any baseball. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that at some point in May, at least, the season can begin and you can at least get, maybe 2 months of action before an all-star break. That would be, in my opinion, an optimistic timeline at this stage, because we just don't know what's going to happen here. And again, um, only so much we can say about it, because this is a process that feels like there's no end to it and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. But regardless, we'll get back to talking about the Mets and talk about what this team could do and projecting out this season. I think we're going to do that a little bit over the next couple of weeks. I might start to dive into individual player breakdowns, what to expect from players as we head into the 2022 season. As always, though, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Locked On Bets is where you want to go for all your daily gambling needs. You can follow Locked On Bets wherever you get podcasts.